so for conventional deadlift, I used to have the same exact problem. That's actually why I initially switched to sumo after my ass exploded the first time. And so I recently went back to conventional, love it. There's a few things I had to modify in order to get to where I need to be. And so I think, because I'm relatively confident we have similar issues going on, these might apply to you as well. So it's just going to be two, I guess you could technically call it three things. I just want to show you real quick, definitely worth playing around with. So the first one is going to be something Joe Sullivan talks about a lot. If you want like a greater detail, definitely go to his Instagram. I think he actually has a YouTube channel about adductors in the squat and his conventional deadlift. So essentially, what we normally do is we always think about like grabbing the floor, rooting and all that, and then we externally rotate. But when we externally rotate, there's three main mechanisms going on, and we can bias any of those depending on how we think about it and how we apply it. So one thing we can do is we can externally rotate using our glute max, right? And then we might actually get some abduction in there, that because we're closed chained with the feet on the floor, we're actually manifesting external rotation. That's where people get in trouble most of the time. The other way that people get in trouble most of the time is the second mechanic, where we're just using, kind of keeping our glute max lax, and we're just externally rotating. These are really deep rotators, so like everything below glute max, so piriformis, gemellus, and the obturators, internal and external. You'll actually hear people tear that, like what's her name? Jen Thompson tore her her freaking obturator because she was not paying attention to her glute max, pulling well over 400. She used the little one too much and tore it. The third way is to use your adductors. People think adductors are internal rotators because of the anatomy. It's not physically possible for them to be internal rotators below hip flexion. And even then, they're still external rotators. So, the way to apply the adductor part, same deal, grab the floor, do the thing. And so, I'm going to show you really exaggerated, and then how it actually looks. So what I imagine is I'm rotating out like normal, but I'm also almost pushing my feet in together. So instead of spreading the floor like that, I'm actually kind of putting them in, and that just turns on the adductor magnus like crazy. And so from here, it just is kind of harder, and that's why you'll actually see me do the almost squat down, and then as close to the bar as possible, and then go for it. So try to think about pushing definitely down into the ground, but more importantly, as if your feet and your tibias are kind of going into the ground. And so you're maintaining that, and you'll know because one, they'll contract really hard. Two, you'll get a massive glute max burn in different fibers than you're used to. You'll get it more in the butt crack area, technical terms, simply because that's what activates reciprocally with the adductors. And so if we can get the adductors to take a lot of the external rotation and a lot of the hip extension demand, then it might help downregulate that gluteal area that's bothering you. Also, if we're using slightly different fiber biases in the glute max, that might help downregulate the area that's really killing you. Although, remember, you do need to decrease your volume and your intensity for a little bit while you're rehabbing true tissue issues. So that's part one, adductors. And then once you're down there, you'll feel it, explore it, feel it around through all positions. So the second thing that I realized I had to do is, kind of mentioned it earlier, instead of, everyone talks about the deadlift being a hinge, like a pure hip hinge. Kind of true, kind of not. First part is essentially a squat. Last part is also the same as a squat because you actually have to hinge for squatting. You said that the middle part is what bothers you, and that makes a lot of sense, especially with where I'm going with this. So you spend a lot of time here, and then you get tight, and then you go. Problem is, what you end up doing is boom. We know that round back deadlifts are totally okay if done controlled and properly, but the problem is when we feed when we lose the slack in our spine, the demand is going to go largely to the glutes, and that's going to change the fiber bias. And that's a large part of what we're trying to avoid right now with at least these small changes. And so what I would suggest is, earlier we thought it was a lot of hamstring, and we thought it was lateral glute where it actually attached to the femur. And then even before that, we thought it was some deep rotator stuff. So what I want you to consider is, instead of doing it down here and getting tight, I don't think you're built for that. I think you're built for the brace, get tight, get ready, squeeze the shit out of your quads, adductors, glutes, squatting down as far as you can while maintaining that tension. You won't get to the bar yet. And then that's where you hinge. And then you're gonna try playing with the hip shoot. So you're actually pressing into the ground. It's not hips back, it's hips up to pull the slack, which will force you to be here. And then I want you to think knees forward and shoulders back. Don't worry about the hips, because those will follow. Your glutes and your drive will follow. The other thing I like to think of is, once I've popped it off the ground, I'm only thinking one thing: knees back. For whatever reason, that knees back cue facilitates everything perfectly. I couldn't explain to you why. It just seems to work for me and a lot of clients as well. So just to review that part, instead of going down here and going for it, I would suggest squat, load, hip shoot. Try to keep the knees forward as much as possible. Think about being as upright as possible. So that's the second thing. I forgot what the third thing was. It was doing adductors, hip shoot. Actually, that was it. The last one, I combined both of them. So what I wanted to actually like bring up more importantly is, some people are built to just be fucking hingers all day. They're posterior chain dominant. They're your super skinny dudes lifting crazy weights who squat like 400. What you'll see with more people built like you and me, we're mostly quad dominant, largely because of our glute issues. In the past, we've just developed a large anterior capacity, and we struggle back here because shit hurts. We're not gonna lift like that. So besides like growing the glutes with like glute bridges and stuff like that, elongating hamstrings, gaining that internal rotation capacity, I would definitely suggest play around with your foot stance. You might be the fucking strong man, 300-pound looking dude who's just gonna fucking long lever that, right? Seems inefficient, but they're brutally strong. The other thing is, you might be narrow man, and you might be narrow man with ER. You might be narrow man with IR. I'm somewhere in the middle. I have to deadlift like this. Very uncomfortable, because when I go down, my hips get in the way, so I need a little bit of abduction with the adductors. Load the hips, shoot the knees forward, knees back all day. So yeah, give those a shot.